Under a sky bruised with the last light of dusk, the wind carried the smell of dust and rain across the open plains. The cowboy rode alone, his coat heavy with trail grit, his horse's hooves thudding softly against the hard earth. His name was Jack Harlan, a man known to few and trusted by fewer. The trail had been long, and silence had been his only companion for weeks. But on that quiet evening, as thunder rolled far off in the hills, something broke the stillness, a sound that didn't belong out there. At first, he thought it was a bird. Then, as he slowed his horse and tilted his head, the sound came again, soft, high, and trembling. A cry. A baby's cry. He dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the damp ground. The wind tugged at his hat brim as he moved toward the sound, every sense alert. Just beyond a cluster of scrub and rocks, something small lay wrapped in a faded blue blanket. The cry weakened as he knelt, his rough hands hesitating before touching it. Inside the blanket was a baby, no more than a few months old, red-cheeked, cold, and alone. Jack stared at it, his heart thudding hard in his chest. Out here, miles from the nearest town, it made no sense. He looked around, the trail stretched empty in both directions, no wagon tracks fresh enough to tell a story. Whoever left the child hadn't been gone long. He took off his hat and let out a slow breath. Well now, he muttered under his breath, voice gravelly from disuse. Ain't you something? The baby whimpered again, tiny fingers clenching at the air. Jack felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, he lifted the small bundle into his arms. The warmth of the child seeped through his coat, fragile but alive. He turned his horse toward town. Whatever story this was, it wasn't one he could ignore. The rain started before he reached the ridge. It came down in cold sheets, soaking through his duster and the blanket wrapped around the baby. Jack pulled it tighter, shielding the small face against his chest. The wind howled, tearing across the plains, but he kept riding slow, steady, determined. By the time the lights of a town flickered in the distance, the storm had spent itself to a drizzle. The town of Willow Bend wasn't much, a saloon, a general store, a church steeple, and a few scattered homes leaning against the wind. He rode straight for the doctor's house, boots squelching as he stepped down and knocked. "Doc, Albee opened the door, eyes going wide at the sight. "Jack Harlan," he said, blinking. "You look like you've been through hell." "What in blazes?" Jack held out the baby. "Found this out on the trail. No sign of who left it." The doctor's hands trembled as he took the child. "Lord above. You say you found it just lying there?" Jack nodded. "Wrapped up, half covered by brush. No tracks that made sense. Looked recent, though." The doctor frowned, motioning for him to come inside. "Well, get in here before you catch your death." Jack followed, dripping on the wooden floor. The house smelled of herbs and lamp oil. The doctor laid the baby on a table, checking for fever or injury, muttering under his breath. "She's cold, but she'll make it. Must have been left only a few hours ago." Jack stared down at the small face. He realized it now, was a girl. Her skin was pale, her hair dark and soft as coal dust. She was quiet now, eyes fluttering open only briefly before sleep claimed her again. Doc glanced up. "You planning to keep riding?" Jack hesitated. "Didn't plan on it. Figured someone ought to know she's alive." The doctor sighed. "We'll have to tell the sheriff. Maybe someone is looking for her." Jack nodded, though his gut told him something different. People didn't lose a baby on the trail. They left one. The next morning, the sheriff came by, an older man named Bill Mercer, worn and serious. He listened to Jack's story, scratching his chin. "We'll post a notice," he said finally. "Somebody'll come forward. Folks don't just leave a child behind unless they have a reason." Jack stayed a few days longer than planned. He helped repair the livery roof, kept to himself, and visited the doctor's house each evening. The baby, whom Doc's wife had started calling Lily, seemed stronger by the day. Every time Jack saw her, wrapped in a quilt and breathing softly, something inside him twisted. He didn't know why he cared. He'd seen death, loss, and everything in between. But this little life left behind, it felt like something sacred. On the fourth day, Just as dawn touched the horizon, the sound of wagon wheels broke the morning calm. Jack looked up from the corral where he was saddling his horse. A covered wagon rolled into town, its driver wrapped in a long coat, a hood drawn low. The horse came to a stop near the sheriff's office, and a woman climbed down. She moved like someone used to hardship, tall, slender, wrapped in dust and determination. When she turned her face toward the light, Jack saw that she was young, maybe mid-20s, though the years had carved something weary into her eyes. She looked around, scanning the town until her gaze landed on the sheriff's door. Jack watched from a distance as she disappeared inside. A few minutes later, the sheriff came out, glancing toward the doctor's place. The woman followed, her expression tight. Jack's stomach sank. He followed slowly as they crossed the street. The doctor opened his door before they could knock, surprise flickering over his face. "Mornin', Sheriff." "Ma'am." The woman's voice trembled, low but strong. "I'm looking for a baby." "My baby?" The room went still. Jack stepped forward, hat in hand. The sheriff looked between them. "Miss, this here's the man who found the child." The woman turned, and for a moment, Jack forgot how to breathe. Her eyes, deep, tired, and filled with something fierce, met his. "You found her?" Jack nodded. "Out on the trail, near Pine Hollow." She was alone. Her lips trembled. "She's mine. I swear she's mine." Doc Albee hesitated. "You got proof, miss?" "Folks want to be sure." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, weathered locket. Inside was a faded photograph, a man, a woman, and a baby no older than the one Jack had found. The sheriff studied it, then nodded slowly. "Seems right." The woman's shoulders sagged with relief as tears welled in her eyes. She reached for the baby, who stirred softly in the doctor's arms. "Lily," she whispered. "Mama's here." Jack stood silent, watching her cradle the child close. Something about it didn't sit right, not the way she held her, but the fear behind her eyes. It wasn't just relief. It was dread. Later, when the woman introduced herself as Eliza Crow, she thanked Jack in a voice barely above a whisper. "You saved her life," she said. "I owe you everything." He nodded, but his instincts, sharpened by years on the trail, kept whispering a question he couldn't shake. If she was telling the truth, why did it feel like she was running from something, too? The town of Willow Bend woke slowly that morning, but news traveled fast. By noon, every whisper along Main Street carried the same words, that a stranger woman had come for the baby the drifter found. Some said she looked like trouble, others said she looked too broken to lie. Jack tried to ignore the talk. He spent the day mending the corral fence behind the livery, yet his thoughts kept circling back to the way Eliza Crow had clutched the child. There'd been love there, yes, but also fear, like someone expecting a door to burst open any moment. When the sun dipped low, he found himself walking toward the boarding house where she'd taken a room. He told himself it was only to make sure the baby was all right. That's what he believed for the first few steps, at least. The window light spilled across the porch boards. Through the thin curtains, he saw Eliza rocking the child, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. The sight hit him harder than he expected, a quiet kind of beauty wrapped in sorrow. He was about to turn away when the door opened. "You plan on standin' there all night, mister?" she asked softly. Caught, he tipped his hat. "Didn't mean to intrude. Just wanted to be sure the little one's keepin' warm." "She is," Eliza said, stepping aside. "You can see for yourself." The room smelled of wood smoke and milk. The baby slept soundly, a faint smile at the corner of her lips. Jack felt a warmth settle through him. Eliza watched him carefully. "You've got a gentle way for someone who rides alone." He shrugged. "Trail teaches a man to be quiet. You learn to listen to what's livin', not just what's talkin'. Her eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You think folks in this town believe me?" "Sheriff does," he said. "He's postin' that the child's been claimed." "Seems settled." Eliza looked down. Nothing ever feels settled for long. Jack didn't press. He'd seen that look before, someone who's run too far to trust peace when it shows up. That night, thunder rolled again across the plains. Jack lay awake in the bunkhouse, listening to the wind. He kept seeing the locket she'd shown the sheriff, the way her fingers trembled on its hinge. Something about it had looked older than she claimed, like it belonged to another time altogether. 2 days later, trouble came riding. A wagon rolled in under cloud cover, drawn by 2 gray horses. 3 men climbed down rough coats, pistols worn low, eyes scanning every corner of town. The first one to speak asked for the sheriff, his voice steady but cold. Bill Mercer met them outside his office. "What's your business in Willow Bend?" The man tipped his hat just enough to show a scar running down his cheek. "Name's Grant Keller. I'm tracking a woman. Name of Eliza Crow. Took something that wasn't hers." Jack was across the street, carrying feed from the stable. He froze at the name. The sheriff's hand hovered near his gun. "Can't say I've heard that name. You got papers?" Keller smirked. "Don't need papers to find what's mine. She stole from me, and she's got something that don't belong to her." Jack felt the air tighten. When the men turned toward the boarding house, he set down the feed sack and started walking, slow but deliberate. He reached the porch just as Eliza opened the door, pale as snow. She'd heard. The baby was clutched tight against her chest. "They're here," she whispered. "Who are they?" Jack asked. Her breath shook. "Men from Kansas. I worked their ranch after my husband died. When the owner passed, they said the baby was his, that I had no right to her. I ran before they could take her away." Jack's jaw set hard. "And now they've come to finish it." Eliza's eyes brimmed. "I didn't lie about her being mine. She is. She's all I have." He believed her. Maybe it was the way she held the child, or maybe it was the raw truth in her voice, but every instinct in him screamed to protect her. Outside, the men spread across the street, eyes on the windows. Keller called out, "Eliza, you bring that child out and no one gets hurt." Jack stepped into the open doorway, rifle in hand. "Ain't gonna happen." Keller's gaze flicked toward him, a slow grin cutting through his face. "You're the one who found her? Then you'd best step aside, Cowboy. Ain't your fight." "Looks like it is now." For a moment, time hung heavy as thunder. Then the sheriff appeared at the corner, rifle drawn. "That's enough. You boys best ride out before I make it official." Keller spat in the dirt. "You're protecting a thief." Mercer didn't blink. "You got proof." Silence. Just the creak of saddle leather and the restless shift of horses. Finally, Keller turned his mount. "We'll be back. A woman like her can't hide forever." The men rode off, dust curling behind them. The sheriff lowered his rifle and looked at Jack. "You sure know how to find trouble." Jack didn't answer. He turned to Eliza, who stood trembling in the doorway. "You need to tell me everything," he said quietly. "From the start." That night she did. They sat by the dying fire in the boarding house parlor, the baby asleep between them. Her story came out slowly: a ranch in Kansas, a sickly husband who died too soon, a wealthy owner who promised to help but wanted more than comfort. When she found herself with child, the whispers turned to blame. The owner's men claimed the baby was his, and after he died, they wanted the girl gone to protect the name. "So I ran," Eliza finished, voice hoarse. "I didn't care if I had to cross every mile of dust between here and the ocean. I just wanted her safe." Jack stared at the flames. "You did right to run. But they ain't done huntin', Dot." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I can't stay." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You could. Willow Bend doesn't ask many questions." A faint smile touched her lips. "And you'd vouch for me?" "Reckon I already did." Outside, the wind howled again, sweeping dust against the windows. Somewhere out there, Keller and his men were circling back, waiting for night or weakness. Jack knew what was coming, a reckoning, the kind that left marks on more than skin. But when he looked at Eliza holding her child, the decision was already made. Whatever storm was riding in, he wasn't letting it take her. The night fell black and heavy over Willow Bend. The wind carried the smell of rain and far-off thunder, but beneath it lay something sharper, danger, moving closer with every gust. Jack sat on the porch of the boarding house, rifle across his knees. The lamps along Main Street flickered, and the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Inside, Eliza tried to rest, but her body trembled each time the wind rattled the window pane. The baby whimpered, sensing her fear. Jack heard her quiet voice, soothing soft lullabies that carried out through the crack of the half-open door. When the clock struck midnight, Sheriff Mercer rode up, dusted from a long patrol. "They're still out there," he said grimly. "Camped near the old riverbed, 3 miles east. I warned them again, but I don't think they're the kind that scare easy." Jack nodded. "They'll wait till you're gone." Mercer exhaled, jaw tight. "There's a cattle theft up north. I've got to ride out before dawn. I'll leave Deputy Clem on watch, but—" Jack cut him off. "Don't worry about us. I'll keep her safe." The sheriff gave a single nod, then turned and mounted up. His silhouette vanished down the street, swallowed by the dark. Inside, Eliza appeared in the doorway, hair unbound, eyes wide. "He's leaving." "Duty calls," Jack said. "But I ain't." She stepped closer, the lamp glow catching the edge of her face, the weariness, the quiet strength. "You don't have to do this, Jack." He looked up at her. "Lady, I've been ridin' alone most my life. First time it feels like I'm standin' for something worth fightin' for. I ain't walkin' away." Her lips parted, a soft breath between disbelief and gratitude. "You'll get yourself killed. Maybe, but not tonight." He stood and checked the rifle chamber. The sound of the bolt sliding home echoed faintly through the still air. Then he doused the lamp. "Keep the baby close. If I say run, you run." Outside, the street had gone silent. Not even the crickets dared speak. Jack could feel it, the waiting. Predators circling the light. The first shadow moved near the stables. Another at the corner of the general store. They were patient, moving slowly, like men who'd done this before. He crouched low behind the water trough, watching. The door creaked behind him. Eliza's whisper, "Jack. Get back inside," he hissed. "Now." But she didn't move. "You can't take them alone." He turned, ready to argue, and froze. A match flared near the barn. A torch caught fire. Then another. Flames licked up the dry hay, and in seconds, orange light tore through the dark. The men wanted her scared. Wanted her to run. Jack swung the rifle up and fired. The crack split the night. One man dropped behind a barrel, another dove for cover. "Go," he shouted. Through the back. Eliza clutched the baby and ran as he laid down cover fire. Smoke rolled through the street, the barn roaring like a furnace. She burst out the back door and into the open fields beyond town, wind whipping her shawl loose. The baby cried against her shoulder. She didn't stop, not even when her breath tore in her chest. Jack followed moments later, pistol drawn, sprinting hard. He caught up with her near the fence line. "We gotta move west, through the ridge." She nodded, tears streaking through soot. "Where will we go?" "Old Ranger cabin up past the bluff." "Nobody goes there anymore." Behind them, the shouts grew louder. Keller's voice carried clearly, "You can't run forever, Eliza." Jack fired a warning shot into the night. "Try me." They ran until their legs burned. The prairie opened wide beneath the moonlight, tall grass silver under the sky. By the time they reached the cabin, Eliza's dress was torn and her lungs were raw, but she held the baby close, never loosening her grip. Jack pushed open the warped door. "Get inside." The cabin smelled of dust and pine. He barred the door with an old beam and moved to the window. In the distance, faint lanterns flickered, moving closer. "They'll track us by dawn," he muttered. Eliza sank to the floor, rocking the child. "Then we have until dawn." Jack knelt beside her, watching the rise and fall of her breath. The flicker of firelight painted her face in gold and shadow. "You ever think," she whispered, "that some folks are just born running?" He shook his head. "No one's born runnin'. They just ain't been given a place to stop." She looked up at him then, really looked. For the first time since he'd found her, there wasn't fear in her eyes, only a deep, aching tiredness. "Thank you," she said softly. "For stayin'." Jack opened his mouth to answer, but stopped when he heard it. The sound of horses again. Closer this time. He doused the small lamp and peered through the window crack. 3 lanterns bobbed near the ridge. Keller and his men were coming. "Get down," he whispered. The night was filled with hoofbeats. Jack's pulse thudded in his throat. He counted the shadows, 3 men, all armed. They stopped near the stream bed, scanning the slope. One dismounted. Keller's voice, smooth and cold. She's here. I can smell the smoke on the wind. Jack steadied the rifle. Keep quiet, he told Eliza. And don't move till I tell you. Then the first shot rang out. Glass shattered. The baby screamed. Jack returned fire, aiming low. One of Keller's men fell with a grunt. The others scattered behind the rocks. The firefight stretched on bursts of gunfire and silence, then another volley. Jack's shoulder burned where a bullet grazed him, but he stayed low, steady. Finally, silence again. Only the hiss of wind through the grass. He crept toward the door, finger on the trigger. A crunch of boots outside. Then Keller's voice, inches from the wall. You think you're some kind of hero, cowboy? You don't even know what that woman's done. Jack pressed his back to the doorframe. Don't need to. I know what you're doing, Dot. She's a liar, Keller said. The child ain't hers. Belongs to a man with more money than you'll ever see. Funny, Jack said, voice calm. Don't see him comin' for her. Just you. Keller laughed once, sharp, bitter. Because he's dead. The words hung there, thick and strange. Jack's stomach turned. What are you talking about? She killed him, Keller said. Poisoned his tea. Ran off before we could prove it. You're hidin' a murderer. Jack didn't answer. His mind reeled, the locket, the fear, the running. Could it be true? But when he turned and saw Eliza holding her baby, trembling but unbroken, he knew his answer. Whatever her past was, she wasn't that woman anymore. He raised his rifle again. You're done talkin', Keller. The gunfire that followed was brief but final. When the smoke cleared, Keller's men were gone, one wounded, one fled, and Keller himself slumped in the dust, eyes wide with disbelief. Jack lowered the rifle slowly. The dawn light began to creep over the ridge, soft and gold, touching the cabin's broken window. Eliza stepped out, barefoot, the baby asleep against her shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. Is it over? Jack looked at the rising sun. For now. She came closer, eyes glistening. You saved us. He met her gaze, tired and full of something new. You make it sound like it's over. It ain't. There'll be questions. The law'll come lookin', Dot. I know. But you won't be alone. Eliza stared at him, searching his face. Why, Jack? Why help me? He smiled faintly, the kind that comes from pain and peace mixed. Guess I just found something worth protectin' again. At dawn, the prairie was washed in soft gold. Smoke still curled from the burned barn down the valley, thin ribbons against a wide, endless sky. Jack stood outside the cabin, hat in hand, the weight of the night heavy on his shoulders. The land looked peaceful now, almost holy, but he knew peace was only a pause between storms. Inside, Eliza bathed the baby with water she'd warmed over the fire. The little one giggled, small fingers reaching for her hair, and for the first time in weeks, a smile touched Eliza's lips. It was faint, but real, a light returning after years of running. Jack turned when he heard her footsteps. She stood in the doorway, the baby swaddled in a rough blanket, framed by morning light. Her eyes met his, steady but uncertain. You didn't sleep, she said softly. He gave a small shrug. Didn't feel right to close my eyes while the world was still tinnin' against us. Eliza stepped outside, the child quiet in her arms. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, just quiet, like the earth itself was catching its breath. You should rest, Jack, she murmured. You're hurt. He touched the bandage on his shoulder. I've had worse. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. He smiled a little. You sound like someone who's been patchin' up men her whole life. Her gaze drifted across the plains. Maybe that's what I've been doin', fixin' broken things that never wanted fixin'. Jack studied her for a long moment. He wanted to ask her the truth about the man Keller claimed she'd killed, about where the baby really came from. But something held him back. Maybe because, in that quiet sunrise, the truth didn't feel like what mattered most. A hawk circled high overhead, its cry sharp in the morning stillness. The land was waking again. Jack's instincts told him they couldn't stay much longer. We'll need to move, he said. Sheriff will ride out here when he hears gunfire tore up half the ridge. Eliza turned to him, eyes filled with worry. And what'll we tell him? The truth, he said simply. Or enough of it to keep you safe. Her lips pressed together. You trust me that much? He looked at her for a long time. Don't know what you did before, Eliza. Don't know what you had to do. But last night, I saw who you are now. That's enough for me. Tears shimmered at the edges of her eyes. No one's ever said that to me before. He stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Then I reckon it's about time someone did. The baby stirred, letting out a small sigh, and Eliza smiled through her tears. Jack turned his eyes toward the distant town. The law was coming, he could feel it. But for that one fragile morning, they let the world be still. By noon, the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Sheriff Mercer rode up the slope, his deputy trailing behind. His expression was grim but not unkind. When he saw Jack standing by the porch, rifle lowered, he nodded once. Heard there was trouble. Jack nodded back. Trouble came lookin'. We sent it away. Mercer's eyes drifted to Eliza, who stood half hidden in the doorway, clutching the baby close. That's so, he said. Funny thing, word reached me Keller and his boys were hired to bring in a runaway. Woman accused of poisoning her husband back in Dry Creek. Eliza flinched. The baby whimpered, and Jack stepped between her and the sheriff. Keller's dead, he said. Shot first, died for it. You gonna arrest her for defendin' herself? Mercer watched him carefully. That depends. She killed that man, or didn't she? Eliza's voice was quiet, trembling. I didn't. He was sick for weeks. I begged them to believe me, but they'd already decided I was guilty. The only thing I took from that house was his child, my sister's baby. She died giving birth, and I couldn't leave him behind. The sheriff's hard gaze softened a little. You ran. I ran because they wouldn't listen. Jack stood firm beside her. You gonna listen now, Sheriff? Mercer sighed and rubbed his jaw. I got half a town wantin' someone to hang for that death. But I got two eyes that see the truth when it's standin' in front of me. You brought Keller down. That's worth more than 100 lies. Eliza stared at him, barely breathing. So you'll let us go? Mercer hesitated, then gave a slow nod. You head north, cross the river, and don't come back this way for a spell. As far as I'm concerned, Keller took the story with him. Jack tipped his hat. Appreciate it, Sheriff. The lawman gave one last look at Eliza, maybe pity, maybe respect, then turned his horse and rode away. Dust rose behind him and faded into the sun. Eliza let out a trembling breath, sinking to her knees. Jack caught her before she fell. It's over, he whispered. She looked up at him, eyes wet, voice breaking. No, Jack. It's just beginning. He smiled softly. Then I reckon we start it together. The sun sat low behind them as Jack and Eliza rode west, the prairies stretching wide and empty, like a promise waiting to be kept. The wind tugged at Eliza's hair, carrying the scent of dust and sage. The baby slept soundly in the small bundle tied against her chest, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait rocking him into peace. Jack rode ahead, silent but watchful. His shoulder still ached from the gunfight, but he didn't complain. He'd been shot before. The difference now was that someone cared. By twilight, they reached the old ridge that overlooked the river valley. Below, the land rolled green and golden, untouched by war, by law, by pain. Smoke curled from a distant ranch chimney, and for a moment, Eliza's eyes softened with something she hadn't dared feel in a long time, hope. Jack stopped his horse and looked back. We'll camp here tonight, he said quietly. They built a small fire beneath a cluster of cottonwoods. Eliza laid the baby beside her in a cradle of blankets, while Jack tended to the horses. The air was cool, and the night came alive with crickets and the far-off howl of a coyote. When he finally sat beside her, she handed him a piece of cornbread from her pack. They ate in silence, the firelight painting their faces gold. After a long moment, Eliza spoke. You could have gone back, Jack. Told the sheriff I'd gone north. Started over somewhere safe. He looked into the fire. Safe's just another word for lonely, Eliza. She studied him, the rough edges, the weariness in his eyes, the man who'd walked through storms for her without ever asking why. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. Jack turned toward her then, his voice low. You keep saying that, Like you don't understand. Ain't about what I owe. It's about what I want. The words hung between them, heavier than the silence. The fire popped. A log split, sparks lifting into the dark sky. Eliza lowered her gaze, blinking away tears. You don't know what you're a skin for. My life. It's always been running. Hiding. You stay with me, and you'll be running too. Jack reached out and took her hand, rough, trembling, but steady. Maybe I'm done running from nothing. Maybe I've been riding my whole life just to find this. Her lips parted, breath catching. For a long while, neither spoke. The baby stirred softly, cooing in his sleep, and Eliza smiled faintly. Jack's voice broke the quiet again. We could settle near the foothills. Heard there's good land up past the river. Nobody'd bother us there. Eliza looked toward the horizon. And if they come again? Then they'll find a man who ain't afraid to fight for what's his. She turned her eyes back to him, a flicker of fear still there, but softer now, giving way to something warmer. And what's yours, Jack? His gaze didn't waver. You. If you'll let me. The night went still. Somewhere in the distance, a barn owl called out, lonely and sweet. Eliza swallowed hard, tears tracing her cheeks. I swore I'd never love again, she whispered. I swore it to a grave. Jack's hand tightened gently around hers. Then maybe it's time you broke that promise. She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her finally gave way. Not weakness, not surrender, but the quiet release of a heart too tired of hiding. She leaned forward, resting her head against his chest. Jack closed his eyes, one arm wrapping around her shoulders as the fire crackled low. The stars above burned clear and endless, stretching over the prairie like a curtain of silver light. For the first time, Eliza wasn't running. And for the first time, Jack wasn't alone. Morning came soft and gold, spreading across the plains like the beginning of something new. Mist rose from the river, curling low over the grass, and the world felt quiet, as if it too was holding its breath. Eliza stirred beside the dying fire, the baby nestled close against her heart. Jack was already awake, crouched by the water's edge, washing the dust from his face. His reflection rippled in the current, sharp features softened by the early light. He glanced back when she approached, boots brushing through the wet grass. You sleep any? He asked. A little, she said, smiling faintly. Feels like the first time in years. He nodded. That's what peace feels like. Strange at first. She knelt beside him, dipping her hands in the cool stream. The baby gurgled softly in her arms, reaching toward the water. For a moment, everything seemed right, too right. That kind of stillness never lasted long on the frontier. Jack's head turned suddenly. The distant thunder of hooves rolled faintly from the south. He stood up fast, scanning the horizon. Riders, he said. Eliza froze. The law. Don't know. But they're movin' hard. He grabbed his rifle and motioned toward the line of cottonwoods. Get behind the trees. Keep the baby low. Eliza obeyed without a word, crouching in the tall grass as Jack took cover near a boulder. The sound grew louder, 5 riders, maybe 6. Dust trailed them like smoke. As they drew near, Jack could make out the lead rider, a tall man in a black hat, coat flapping behind him. Not the sheriff. Bounty men, maybe. The kind who didn't ask questions, just counted bodies. He steadied his aim, but before he could fire, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The rider slowed. The man in black raised a hand and called out, "We come talkin', not shootin'." Jack didn't move. You got a funny way of sayin' hello. The man dismounted, keeping his hands visible. Name's Tucker. We were hired by Keller's brother. He wants the child back. Eliza clutched the baby tighter. Jack stepped into view, rifle leveled. That ain't gonna happen. Tucker's eyes narrowed. You think you can stand against 6 men? Jack's voice was low and steady. I've stood against worse for less reason. The 2 men locked eyes. For a moment, the air between them was all tension and dust. Then Tucker sighed, lowering his hand. He said she killed a man. Is that true? Jack glanced at Eliza, then back. No. That man killed himself with his own greed. Tucker studied him, saw the truth there, or something close enough to it, and after a long silence, he nodded. Keller's dead anyway. Ain't no bounty left to claim. He swung back into his saddle. You never saw us. Jack gave a single nod. Never did. The riders turned and rode off, their figures shrinking into the horizon until they were nothing but specks against the morning light. Eliza sank to her knees, trembling. Jack hurried to her side, kneeling beside her. She was crying soft, silent tears that carried years of fear and loss. It's over, he whispered. Truly over. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. How do you know? He smiled faintly. Because the world's too wide for hate to follow forever. She reached out then, her hand finding his. What now? Jack looked out across the river valley, where sunlight danced on the water. We find a place to build. A place the past can't touch. They rode for hours after that, following the river until it curved through a grove of cottonwoods and opened into a small meadow, green, peaceful and waiting. A weathered cabin stood there, long abandoned, but strong enough to stand another 100 years. Eliza smiled as she looked at it, the baby asleep in her arms. It's beautiful. Jack dismounted, walking up to the porch. Needs work, he said, testing the steps with his boot. She joined him, her eyes soft. We could make it a home. He turned to her, sunlight catching the edge of his hat. We already did. The words settled between them, warm and quiet. For the first time, Eliza didn't flinch from hope. She let herself believe in it. In him. They stayed there by the cabin as the day faded. The baby laughed for the first time that evening, a sound so pure it made Jack stop and smile like a man who'd just found gold in the river. As the sun dipped low, Eliza whispered, Do you ever wonder why life gives us second chances? Jack leaned against the porch rail, gazing out at the endless sky. Maybe 'cause the first time, we didn't know what to do with them. She nodded slowly, tears shining in her eyes. Then I won't waste this one. He reached for her hand again, and together they stood beneath the dying light, the prairie stretching out before them, untamed, endless, and free. For the first time since she'd sworn never to love again, Eliza didn't feel haunted by ghosts. The trail had taken everything from her once, but it had also given something back, a man who saw her not as a sinner or a saint, but as someone worth saving. And for Jack, a wanderer with no home, no past worth keeping, love had finally given him something to stay for. In the fading gold of sunset, two lost souls found their peace. And the land, vast and wild, held their story in silence, as all true Western loves are held, somewhere between dust and forever.